They thought Danielle Carter was the perfect victim, silent, small, and too scared to fight back. In the crowded hallway of Westview High, those bullies believed they owned the air she breathed, until the moment their hands closed around her throat and she whispered the one sentence that would end their entire world: "Dad, help me." 5 minutes later, her father, a man they should have never underestimated, walked into that school and tore down every lie, every cover-up, every coward hiding behind authority. Everything began with a glance that lasted too long, a single wrong moment in the hallway, and Danielle had no idea her entire life was about to be ripped apart before lunch. The morning rush at Westview High was already suffocating. Lockers slammed like gunshots, gossip spilled across the halls, and students moved in frantic, overlapping streams of noise. But for Danielle Carter, clutching her notebooks against her chest as she hurried to turn in her late assignment, the chaos wasn't the threat. The threat was the people hidden inside it. She rounded the corner too quickly and collided with the worst person possible. Her shoulder struck something solid. Her notebooks burst from her arms and scattered across the glossy floor. When she looked up, breath-catching, she met the cold, narrowed eyes of Kane Miller, captain of the football team and unofficial tyrant of Westview High. Behind him loomed his shadows, Tyler, Brent, and Mason, already smirking as if they'd been waiting for a show. Kane looked down at her without moving, without blinking. "Watch it," he muttered, as if her existence alone was an inconvenience. Danielle murmured a quiet apology and bent down to gather her papers, wishing, just once, that she could move through school without brushing against the cruelty that stalked its halls. But Kane crouched faster. He grabbed her notebook first, not to help, but to pry. The moment he opened it, something flickered across his face. Recognition, then amusement, then something darker. A photograph slipped halfway out. A picture of her father in full Special Forces uniform, standing tall, eyes sharp beneath the brim of his service cap. Kane lifted the photo between two fingers, twirling it like a toy. "Well, well," he said, voice dripping venom. "Daddy's a big hero, huh?" His smirk widened. "Funny, the daughter of a special ops soldier, and she's still nothing but trash in my hallway." Students nearby slowed their steps. Some watched openly, some pretended not to, but none spoke. Danielle felt her breath freeze, but she didn't respond, didn't look at him, didn't give him the satisfaction of fear, even though fear was already tightening like a fist around her ribs. She simply reached for her photo. Her silence enraged him. Kane snapped his hand back before she could touch it. "Don't ignore me," he said softly, dangerously. His friends chuckled behind him, enjoying the tension like it was entertainment put on for them. Still, Danielle stayed silent, and that silence, steady, defiant, almost dignified, was the thing that made Kane's grin twist into something vicious. He slipped the photo into his jacket pocket. "I'll hold on to this," he said, "just in case I need proof of who you really are." A chill stabbed through her chest. He wasn't just taking a photo. He was taking the one thing her father kept closest to his heart, a picture he'd given her the morning he left for his last deployment. If he knew she lost it, or worse, that someone like Kane had it, he would explode. Kane stood up, towering over her. "You should say thank you," he said slowly, "but I guess manners aren't something they teach in your kind of family." Tyler snorted. Brent elbowed Mason to make sure he didn't miss Danielle's expression. And for a second, just a second, Danielle felt like the hallway had tilted beneath her feet. Kane brushed past her, shoulders slamming into hers harder than necessary. His voice floated behind him. "See you in class, Carter." Danielle gathered her things with trembling hands. She had no idea that this tiny crack in the morning would become a disaster so violent that, by the afternoon, the entire school would be shaken to its core. When a classroom turns into a battlefield, no one ever stands with the weak. The clock struck 10:15 a.m. when Danielle slipped quietly into her history class, sliding into her usual seat near the front, close enough to the teacher to avoid trouble, but not close enough to draw unwanted attention. Sunlight spilled through the tall windows, casting warm stripes across the wooden desks. It should have been an ordinary lesson, but the moment Kane Miller walked in, it became anything but. He chose the desk directly behind her, deliberately. His footsteps were slow, his grin too satisfied. Tyler, Brent, and Mason occupied the row diagonally behind him, forming a crooked line of eyes that never left Danielle's back. As soon as she sat upright, Kane started, a soft kick to the back of her chair, gentle at first, almost playful. Another, harder, then another, perfectly timed to jolt her every few seconds. Danielle kept her spine straight, pretending not to feel it, pretending she didn't hear the quiet laughter bubbling from the row behind her, pretending she wasn't trembling inside. She focused her eyes on her notebook, gripping her pen so tightly the edge dug into her skin. Mr. Harris, their history teacher, cleared his throat and began the lecture without looking up. As usual, he didn't notice, or maybe he didn't want to notice. A crumpled piece of paper hit Danielle's shoulder. She brushed it away without turning around. Kane leaned forward, close enough for his breath to skim the back of her ear. "Miss me?" he whispered. Danielle stiffened. Then she felt fingers in her hair. Kane was shoving another torn scrap into her braid. She reached back, removing it with a steady hand. Still no reaction. Still no sound. She had learned long ago that reacting only fed them. Mr. Harris droned on about colonial trade systems, oblivious or willfully blind. Around them, the class quietly enjoyed the show. Then Kane escalated. He cracked open Danielle's notebook the moment she set it on the side of her desk. His hands were quick, practiced. He slid the stolen photo from his pocket and placed it inside, flipping pages just loudly enough for nearby students to notice. One student snickered. Another nudged their friend. Kane lifted the photo, holding it up like a trophy. "Hey, guys," he whispered loudly. "Check out Danielle's daddy. Looks like G.I. Joe had a bad day." The whisper wasn't quiet enough. Heads began turning. Whispers spread like wildfire. The humiliation came in waves. Sharp, hot, relentless. Danielle felt her face burn as 20 pairs of eyes locked onto her. The worst part wasn't the mockery. It was the betrayal carved into every stare. Judgment, pity, entertainment. Mr. Harris finally looked up, but instead of reprimanding Kane, who was very clearly holding something that wasn't his, he narrowed his eyes at Danielle. "Danielle Carter," he said sharply. "Stop causing a disruption." The room erupted in laughter. Danielle's throat tightened. She tried to speak, to defend herself, but Harris raised a hand, silencing her as if she were the problem. Kane leaned back in his chair, victorious. "Yeah, Danielle," he said under his breath. "Try to behave." Another round of giggles. Danielle stared down at her desk, cheeks burning, hands shaking beneath the wood. She didn't understand how adults could look straight at the truth and still choose the lie. Why teachers believed Kane before her. Why silence seemed safer than speaking. Why nobody ever stood up for her. But Kane wasn't done, not even close. As the bell rang, he rose slowly, brushing past her desk. "Recess is next," he whispered, tapping the stolen photo against her shoulder. "And I think you and I have some unfinished business." But Danielle didn't know that Kane wanted more than humiliation. He wanted to break her completely. And recess was when he planned to wrap his hands around her throat. It takes only 10 seconds for a bully to believe he owns the world. The classroom emptied quickly after the bell, students spilling into the hallway like water escaping a cracked dam. But Danielle stayed behind, moving slowly, trying to gather her things, while her hands still trembled from the humiliation she endured minutes earlier. The room felt colder now, quieter, too quiet. She could hear the faint echoes of laughter drifting in from outside. She wasn't alone. The soft click of the door made her freeze. Kane Miller stepped back inside, followed by Tyler, Brent, and Mason, who spread out like hyenas approaching prey. Kane closed the door with his foot and locked it. "Thought you could just walk away?" he said, voice low and poisonous. Danielle swallowed hard. Her heart hammered so loudly she could hear it in her ears. She took a step back, clutching her notebook to her chest. The same notebook he had rifled through hours earlier. Kane's eyes locked onto it instantly. "Give it to me," he said, stepping closer. Danielle shook her head, hugging the notebook tighter. That tiny act of defiance snapped something inside Kane. He lunged. In 2 steps, he reached her, slamming her back into the wall so hard dust shook loose from the bulletin board. The impact forced the air from her lungs. She tried to slide sideways, but Kane trapped her with his forearm, pressing it across her collarbone. His other hand clawed at her notebook. "Let go," he growled. Danielle turned her body away, shielding the notebook like it was the last piece of herself she could protect. Kane's patience, already razor-thin, snapped. "I said let go!" He yanked the notebook from her grip, tossing it to the floor. Papers burst across the tiles like scattered feathers. Then, with no hesitation, Kane's hand shot to her throat. The cold shock of his fingers wrapping around her neck made her knees buckle. His grip tightened, hard, merciless, deliberate. Danielle's breath vanished instantly. She clawed at his wrist, her eyes wide, her chest heaving in desperate, broken gasps. Behind him, Tyler, Brent, and Mason stood frozen, not with regret, but fascination, like they were witnessing entertainment meant only for them. Kane leaned in close, his breath hot against her cheek. "This is what happens when you don't listen." Spots of white burst across her vision. Her legs wobbled. Her pulse pounded in her skull like a warning she couldn't answer. She tried to speak, but only a cracked whisper escaped her lips. "Dad, help me." It wasn't a scream. It wasn't even loud. But it was real, raw, terrified, pleading, and the classroom heard it. The building heard it, but more importantly, someone else heard it. Hidden inside the back corner of the room, the small security camera blinked red. An automatic emergency algorithm, one installed by Marcus Carter himself, triggered the second the lens detected violent movement and physical restraint. A notification packet launched instantly. The footage clipped itself. A live alert pushed to one person only: Danielle's father. Marcus Carter's phone buzzed inside his coat pocket as he stood in the administrative building next door, finishing a brief security consultation with local officials. He reached for the phone casually and froze when he saw the thumbnail. His daughter, pinned, choking. His heartbeat vanished, then returned with the force of a detonating mine. Back inside the classroom, Danielle's knees gave out. Kane tightened his grip, enjoying the power, the control, the fear, but he didn't know the camera was still recording, didn't know the footage had already left the room, didn't know help was coming in a storm he could not outrun, and in 5 minutes, Westview High would witness the wrath of a father no one, not even Kane, could ever afford to underestimate. When the system meant to protect students, sides with the powerful, tragedy becomes only a matter of time. Recess had ended, but the screams inside the hallway had not fully faded. Danielle stumbled out of the classroom first, hand clutching her throat, skin still burning where Kane's fingers had dug in. Her breaths came shallow, shaky, broken. The hallway spun around her in muted colors. Behind her, Kane followed, calm, composed, rehearsed, like nothing had happened. But the moment Danielle collapsed against a locker, fighting for air, a figure rounded the corner. Officer Reese Dalton, the school's resource officer, strode toward them with urgency. His radio crackled, and his eyes narrowed at the disheveled scene. Danielle looked terrified, trembling. Kane looked annoyed. "What's going on?" Reese demanded. Danielle opened her mouth, but her voice cracked. He grabbed me." Kane cut her off instantly. "She attacked me." Reese blinked. "What?" Kane stepped forward, adopting the role of victim like he'd practiced it his whole life. "Yeah," he said, rubbing his arm dramatically. "She went crazy during recess. Tried to choke me. I had to defend myself." Danielle's jaw dropped. That's not what? No, you. Reese raised a hand sharply, silencing her. Tyler, Brent, and Mason appeared from behind Kane, all nodding along, backing his lie without hesitation. Their synchronized performance was flawless, a toxic brotherhood built on privilege and practiced manipulation. She's lying, Tyler added. Totally unprovoked, Brent said. She snapped, Mason chimed in. Reese turned to Danielle. The coldness in his eyes made her stomach twist. I don't know what's going on with you today, he said slowly, but attacking a fellow student is serious. Danielle stared at him, stunned. I didn't attack anyone. He grabbed me. He tried to choke. Hey, Reese barked, his voice echoing down the hall. Don't raise your voice at me. Danielle flinched. Kane watched with satisfaction. Reese continued, stern and unyielding. Your behavior is aggressive and unacceptable. This school has a zero-tolerance policy for violence. But I didn't. Danielle's voice cracked, desperation spilling out. Please, just check the... I said enough. Reese snapped. Her throat tightened painfully. Not from Kane's grip this time, but from the crushing realization that the adults who were supposed to protect her had already chosen a side. Kane's side. Reese grabbed her arm harshly. Turn around. Danielle's eyes widened. What? What are you? I'm detaining you until we can sort this out, Tyler smirked. Mason whispered something that made Brent laugh. Kane just folded his arms, victorious, acting as if justice was unfolding exactly as it should. Reese pulled out a pair of handcuffs. Metal glinted under the fluorescent lights. Danielle froze. No, no, please. Her voice shook. I didn't do anything. Please, listen to me. Reese shook his head, unimpressed. I've heard enough. He reached for her wrist. Cold metal brushed her skin, and just as the handcuff was about to snap shut, a voice erupted from the far end of the hallway. Deep, sharp, commanding. The kind of voice that didn't request attention. It seized it. Step away from my daughter. The entire hall went still. Students stopped mid-step. Teachers paused mid-sentence. Even Reese's hand froze in place, because the man approaching, eyes burning with controlled fury, jaw clenched with lethal precision, shoulders squared like a soldier entering a battlefield, was Colonel Marcus Carter, and every person in Westview High suddenly understood something far bigger than school politics had just entered the building. And what Marcus Carter was about to do next would shake the entire school down to its foundation. When a special forces father walks into a school, the entire building forgets how to breathe. Colonel Marcus Carter didn't run. He didn't need to. His steps down the hallway were slow, heavy, deliberate, each one striking the tile like a warning shot. Students instinctively moved aside, parting in silence as if pulled by an invisible force. Conversations died mid-sentence. Backpacks were clutched closer. Even teachers froze with their hands still raised at whiteboards. Marcus's expression was carved from stone, cold, lethal, unbreakable. His eyes, sharp as a sniper's focus, locked straight on the scene unfolding ahead of him. Danielle, shaking. Reese Dalton, holding her wrist. Kane Miller, pretending innocence with his back pressed to the lockers. Marcus's jaw tightened. The hallway temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Reese cleared his throat, trying to regain some authority as Marcus approached. Sir, this is a school matter. I need you to remove your hand from my daughter. Marcus's voice was low, even, and more terrifying than a shout. Reese's mouth opened, but no sound came out. His fingers slipped from Danielle's arm as if they'd been burned. Danielle immediately stepped behind her father, her breath trembling against his shoulder blade. Marcus didn't look at her. Not yet. His attention was fixed entirely on the man who had dared to touch her. Reese tried again, forcing confidence into his tone. Colonel Carter, let's be reasonable. Marcus stepped closer. I asked you a question earlier, he said slowly. What exactly happened here? Reese swallowed. She attacked Kane. I was only detaining... Stop. The single word sliced the air in half. Then Marcus turned his gaze on Kane. Kane stiffened. His lips parted, but his voice abandoned him completely. The swagger he normally carried evaporated like smoke in wind. Behind Marcus, a small group of students began filming on their phones, breaths held tight. Every instinct told them something massive was about to unfold, something no one wanted to miss. Marcus held out a hand. "Give me your body camera feed and access to the classroom footage, now." Reese froze. "Sir, I can't just hand over—" "Oh, you can." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "Because I funded the installation of every classroom security system in this building. After Westview received too many complaints of racial harassment." His voice gained a chilling clarity. "I installed safeguards, and I have full administrative access." Kane's face drained of color. Plot twist number 5 had just detonated. A few students gasped. Tyler muttered, "No way," under his breath. Mason looked like he might faint. Brent edged backward, searching for an exit that didn't exist. Marcus continued, his tone deadly calm. "My phone already received an alert the moment your classroom camera detected violent behavior, and it sent me a live clip." He glanced at Reese. "Would you like to explain why your first instinct was to handcuff an assault victim instead of the aggressor?" Reese's lips trembled. He had no answer. None that wouldn't bury him. Marcus stepped past him and knelt beside Danielle. He touched her chin gently, inspecting the red marks blooming across her neck. His eyes darkened to something primal, something dangerous. He rose slowly, turning back toward Kane. "You put your hands on my daughter," Marcus said, voice low enough that everyone had to lean in to hear. "And then you tried to lie your way out of it." Kane took a small step back. I didn't. She attacked me first." Marcus's voice cut through him like a blade. "The camera says otherwise." Gasps rippled through the hallway. Reese felt the shift before anyone else did. The power no longer belonged to him, or to the school, or to Kane's family name. It belonged entirely to Marcus Carter. But Marcus hadn't come just to rescue his daughter. He had come to tear down the entire system that had allowed this to happen in the first place. Power doesn't make people strong. It only exposes who they really are. Principal Evelyn Vaughan's office was supposed to feel authoritative. The walls were lined with framed certificates, motivational posters, and photographs of smiling students. Her oak desk gleamed under soft lamplight. Everything about the room was designed to project control, but as Colonel Marcus Carter stepped through the door, all that illusion cracked. Danielle followed closely behind him, still rubbing the fading marks on her throat. Reese Dalton lingered near the wall, wiping sweat from his brow, trying to appear less shaken than he was. Vaughan sat behind her desk, fingers knotted tightly, her polite smile strained and trembling at the edges. "Colonel Carter," she began, tone too sweet to be sincere, "I've heard there was a misunderstanding between the students." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "Misunderstanding? Yes," she continued, forcing a laugh. "Teenagers get emotional. They exaggerate. Conflicts happen. It doesn't mean anyone meant real harm." Danielle flinched. Reese looked at the floor, but Marcus stepped forward, placing both hands on Vaughan's desk, leaning in slightly. "My daughter was assaulted." Vaughan raised her palms defensively. "Let's not escalate this unnecessarily. Kane Miller is an exemplary student, a leader. He comes from a respected family, and he insists Danielle attacked him first." Marcus exhaled slowly through his nose, as if holding back a hurricane. "Show her the footage," he told Reese without looking at him. Reese froze. "Sir, Now." Reluctantly, Reese pulled out his tablet and opened the classroom video file Marcus had sent to him minutes earlier. He set it on the desk. The clip played. Kane slamming Danielle into the wall, Kane grabbing her throat, Kane squeezing, Danielle's strangled whisper, "Dad, help me." Vaughan's face blanched, but she recovered quickly, too quickly. "Well, cameras can be misleading," she said softly. Marcus laughed. But it wasn't a sound of humor. It was sharp, cold, terrifying. Misleading? His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Are you telling me the camera lied? Vaughn swallowed. Colonel, I'm saying we shouldn't jump to conclusions about a good student. A good student doesn't choke a girl half his size. The veneer of composure slipped. Her voice hardened. I will not let you intimidate this school with your military background, Marcus. Procedures must be followed, and Kane has rights too. Marcus straightened, eyes deadly calm. You want procedures? He said. Fine, let's talk procedures. He pulled a folder from his coat and dropped it onto her desk with a heavy thud. Papers spilled out. Incident reports, ignored complaints, testimony from students who were dismissed or silenced. Vaughn's eyes widened. These are records from 6 students of color, Marcus said, each reporting harassment. Each case conveniently closed without investigation. That's confidential, Vaughn stammered. It's evidence, Marcus cut in, of a school that chooses to protect privileged offenders instead of vulnerable students. He lifted another document. And this, he said, is a notice I sent 10 minutes ago to the State Department of Education. Reese froze. Danielle gasped. Vaughn's jaw dropped, detonated without mercy. Marcus continued, tone level and lethal. I've filed an official complaint with the state regarding racial discrimination, repeated negligence, and the suppression of evidence. I've submitted the camera footage, the audio logs, and every ignored report you pretended didn't exist. Vaughn's face drained of color. You contacted the state? Already? Yes, Marcus said, because I don't wait for systems like yours to suddenly grow a conscience. Her voice cracked. Colonel, please, this will ruin the school. No, Marcus said coldly. This will expose it. Silence swallowed the office. Heavy, condemning. Vaughn's hands shook as she grabbed the edge of her desk. Reese shifted uncomfortably, knowing his own failure as an officer was also under the microscope now. Danielle watched her father, shoulders squared, voice unwavering, realizing she had never seen anyone dismantle injustice so methodically, so precisely. Marcus turned toward the door. This isn't finished, he said. Not until every person responsible is held accountable. And from this moment on, the real storm was about to begin, one that would shake Westview High down to its foundations. An angry father can tear every lie to pieces in minutes. The atmosphere inside Westview High's security office felt different the moment Colonel Marcus Carter stepped through the doorway. The room was narrow, packed with monitors showing every corner of the campus, hallways, stairwells, classrooms, the cafeteria. The screens flickered in a cold blue glow, casting sharp shadows across the walls. The security officer on duty, Mr. Lanning, nearly fell out of his chair when he saw Marcus. Colonel Carter, sir, I wasn't expecting— You don't need to expect me, Marcus said, his tone razor-sharp. You just need to cooperate. Danielle followed her father closely, arms wrapped around herself. Even inside this small, cramped room, she kept looking over her shoulder, as if Kane might appear again. Marcus didn't allow hesitation. I want access to the full camera archives from the last 90 days, he said. Lanning blinked. 90, sir? That's a lot of footage. You'll pull it, Marcus replied. Or I'll request it directly from the state database. Your choice. Lanning swallowed hard and turned to the monitors. With trembling fingers, he began pulling up files, date after date, room after room, until the entire wall of screens filled with thumbnails of past recordings. Marcus stood behind him like a storm waiting to break. Start with student complaints that were never investigated. Lanning stiffened. Sir, I'm not sure what you mean. Yes, you do, Marcus said, voice low. And you can either help me now or explain to the state why Westview High keeps losing video files every time a privileged student is involved. Lanning's face drained of color. He clicked rapidly through folders, opening archived clips, ones he clearly hoped no one would ever see again. The first clip loaded. The first A black boy shoved into a locker by two football players, ignored by a passing teacher. The next clip, a girl being mocked for her hair while her classmates filmed her. Another, a student cornered near the bathrooms while Kane laughed in the background. Danielle watched with wide, stinging eyes. She had seen scenes like these happen around her, but she didn't know there were so many. Marcus didn't blink. "Bookmark every single one," he ordered. "Timestamp, date, student names." Lanning's fingers flew. Danielle inhaled shakily. There were things that happened to me, too," she whispered. Marcus turned to her gently. "Tell me." It took effort for Danielle to speak, her voice small, bruised, but steady. "They used to shove my books off my desk, call me names. Sometimes they would block the door so I couldn't leave. I told teachers, but—" She shook her head. "They never did anything." Marcus glanced at Lanning. "Find footage." Lanning searched. The video appeared on the main screen. Danielle being pushed in the hallway. Danielle being mocked at her locker. Danielle sitting alone while students threw paper at her. Each clip was like a blade turning inside Marcus's chest. He clenched his jaw so tight the muscle jumped. But then, another recording loaded automatically, flagged by the system. Marcus leaned forward. "Play it." The video showed Kane in the gym. He shoved a student to the floor, kicked his backpack aside, and walked away laughing. The victim limped out of frame. "Where is the incident report for this?" Marcus asked. Lanning hesitated. It was deleted. By who? Lanning clicked the metadata. The approval signature flashed across the screen. Principal Evelyn Vaughn. Silence dropped like a hammer. Marcus's eyes sharpened into something lethal. "Open the next file," he ordered. Lanning obeyed. Another Kane assault. Deleted by Vaughn. A third. Deleted again. Marcus's chest rose slowly, controlled rage simmering beneath every word. "3 assaults," he said. "3 times your principal erased them to protect him." Danielle looked between the screens and her father. Fear, anger, and relief, colliding all at once, had been exposed. Marcus closed his fist. The truth was undeniable, overwhelming, damning, and it was only the beginning. He turned toward the door, voice vibrating with finality. "Download all of this," he said. "Every file, every deletion log, every camera feed. I'm done playing inside their system." Because now that the truth was exposed, Marcus knew exactly what he had to do, and it was something Westview High would never forget. When a Special Forces officer wields the law as a weapon, no one, not even a principal, can dodge the impact. The main lobby of Westview High had never felt this tense. Students lined the staircases and crowded around the railing of the second floor, whispering in frantic waves. Teachers huddled near the walls, uncertain whether they should intervene or simply stay out of the blast radius. Phones were already out, recording, buzzing, streaming. At the center of the room, Colonel Marcus Carter stood unmoving, shoulders squared, eyes locked on the woman who had tried to excuse his daughter's assault. Principal Evelyn Vaughn stepped forward with forced authority, though her voice trembled at the edges. "Colonel Carter, you're blowing this out of proportion. There's no need to—" A door swung open so sharply it slammed into the stopper. 3 individuals walked in, not police, not social workers, not district representatives. They were dressed in professional dark suits, carrying heavy legal briefcases and federal identification badges clipped to their jackets. A ripple of shock tore through the lobby. The Federal Educational Legal Task Force. Marcus didn't turn toward them. He simply nodded once in acknowledgement. Vaughn's voice cracked. You didn't." "I did," Marcus replied. The tallest of the attorneys, Attorney Sinclair, stepped beside Marcus. "Principal Vaughn, I am here on behalf of the State Department of Education and the Office for Civil Rights. Under federal mandate, we are required to investigate claims of racial discrimination, the suppression of incident reports, and the destruction or alteration of safety records." Vaughn's knees visibly weakened. The crowd behind her gasped. Sinclair opened his briefcase and handed Vaughn a folder thick enough to choke a bureaucracy. Inside were the 5 charges Marcus had prepared, each one backed with evidence. Charge 1: racial harassment and discrimination. Repeated incidents of students of color being targeted, mocked, bullied, and ignored by faculty. Charge 2: violence against students. Video evidence of assaults, including Danielle's, ignored or dismissed. Charge 3: negligence and dereliction of duty, teachers failing to respond to reports, coaches covering for athletes, administrators disregarding student safety. Charge 4: tampering with evidence, security footage deleted without proper authorization, metadata showing Vaughn's digital signature. Charge 5: creating and sustaining an unsafe educational environment, a school culture where bullies were protected and victims were silenced. Vaughn's breath hitched as she flipped through the pages. This can't be. These files were confidential. They were negligent, Sinclair corrected calmly. And now they are federal. Marcus finally stepped forward, his voice steady and lethal. You chose to protect a violent student because of his family's influence. You chose to ignore reports from students who trusted you. And you chose to erase evidence to save your school's image, Vaughn whispered. Colonel, please. This isn't about me, Marcus said. It's about every kid who walked into this building believing adults would protect them. Attorney Sinclair added, Your school is now under active investigation. You are required to surrender your office, your login credentials, and all administrative access pending review. Gasps exploded through the lobby. Vaughn shook her head violently. You can't remove me from my position. You removed yourself, Marcus said coldly, when you erased 3 assault reports involving my daughter's attacker. The attorneys stepped forward. 2 more staff members arrived, state-appointed auditors, holding sealed evidence bags and lists of items to confiscate. The panic in Vaughn's eyes, transformed into something hollow and defeated, had landed with the force of a hammer. Students whispered, Is she getting fired? Are they really going to arrest her? This is insane. Marcus didn't break his stance. Westview High won't cover up another incident, he said. Not while I'm standing here. Sinclair closed his briefcase. We're not leaving until every responsible party is brought to light. And the legal task force wouldn't leave. Not until every last culprit was dragged into the open, no matter how high their rank or how powerful their family name. The most confident bully is always the one who thinks he'll never be caught. The large assembly hall of Westview High buzzed with restless energy. Rows upon rows of chairs filled the space, occupied by students, parents, teachers, and staff. The air felt heavy, thick with anticipation and fear. Everyone knew something historic was about to unfold. At the front of the room, a long conference table stretched across the stage. Seated behind it were the Federal Legal Task Force, Attorney Sinclair, and Marcus Carter, whose presence commanded the room like an immovable force. Danielle sat quietly to the side, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She kept her eyes down, but her father's steady presence beside her grounded her. Then the doors opened. Kane Miller walked in escorted by 2 school administrators, his swagger noticeably diminished. His parents trailed behind him, wearing identical expressions of outrage and denial. Kane's jaw flexed nervously when he saw the size of the crowd, and the cold stare of Marcus Carter locked directly on him. A hush fell over the room. Attorney Sinclair stepped up to the podium. Thank you all for coming. Today we will address the incident involving student Kane Miller and Danielle Carter. The evidence will now be presented. The lights dimmed. A projector screen descended with a soft mechanical whir. Kane's face drained of color. The footage started. There was no music, no commentary, only the raw, unedited truth. Kane slamming Danielle into the classroom wall. Kane's fingers tightening around her throat. Danielle gasping, struggling, whispering, "Dad, help me." The room erupted in shocked murmurs, some gasps, some cries, some parents covering their mouths in horror. Students stared wide-eyed, their earlier assumptions shattered. Kane's mother grabbed his arm. "Kane, what did you do?" He shook her off, face bright red. "That video doesn't show everything." The clip continued, unrelenting. Kane leaning closer, sneering, his grip tightening. And then the screen froze on Danielle's terrified face, the marks visible on her neck, her fear unmistakable. Marcus stood. His voice was quiet, but it reached the very back of the hall. "This is what your school tried to cover up." The audience stirred angrily, but Kane wasn't done. He shoved himself to his feet, pointing a trembling finger at Danielle. "She attacked me first. She grabbed me. Everyone knows she has anger issues. She started it." Gasps rippled across the room. Marcus didn't move. He simply nodded to Sinclair. "Play the audio," Sinclair instructed. A second recording began, the classroom microphone feed, automatically synced with the camera. A faint buzz filled the hall, then voices emerged. Danielle's footsteps. Kane cornering her. His voice, clear, menacing. "You better listen when I talk to you. Give me the notebook or I swear, don't ignore me, you little—" Followed by the unmistakable sound of Danielle hitting the wall. Silence. And then her choked plea. "Dad, help me!" The hall erupted. Students whispered fiercely. "He lied. He actually lied in front of everyone. What a monster!" Parents stared in disgust. Even teachers who had once protected Kane looked away in shame. Kane's father jumped up, shouting, "This is manipulated! You're destroying my son's reputation." Attorney Sinclair turned calmly. "No, Mr. Miller. Your son destroyed it himself. Had landed like a bomb." Marcus stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "The video, the audio, the metadata, all time-stamped and verified. Your son wasn't defending himself. He was assaulting my daughter while his friends watched." Kane looked around wildly at the crowd that once adored him, now recoiling as if he carried a contagious disease. His mask had been shattered, exposed, humiliated, stripped of every lie he once hid behind. But Marcus wasn't finished, because the humiliation Kane felt now was nothing compared to what awaited him next. When the consequences finally came crashing down, when parents teach their child that they stand above the law, they eventually learn the opposite, publicly, painfully, and without mercy. The disciplinary council room had never held this much tension. A long mahogany table stretched across the center, surrounded by stiff-backed chairs occupied by the school board members, each one grim, silent, and visibly bracing for the explosion to come. Folders, evidence bags, and legal documents were stacked in neat but threatening piles. Kane sat in the chair nearest the front, shoulders hunched, hands twisting nervously. His face still burned from the humiliation of the assembly hall. He hadn't said a word since being escorted inside. Then the door burst open. Mr. and Mrs. Miller stormed in, radiating outrage. His mother's heels clicked like gunshots across the floor. His father jabbed a finger at Marcus the moment he entered. "You set our son up," Mr. Miller barked. "You manipulated those recordings. You think your military background gives you the right to humiliate us?" Mrs. Miller chimed in, voice shrill and furious. "We will sue this school, this district, and every person responsible for spreading those lies." Marcus didn't flinch. He stood beside Danielle, calm and unmovable, like a fortress carved from stone. Attorney Sinclair spoke first. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller, please sit. This is an official disciplinary hearing." "We're not sitting," Mr. Miller snapped. "Not until that man is removed from this room." Marcus didn't even turn his head. "I'm not going anywhere." The school board chairwoman cleared her throat sharply. "Your son is the one facing disciplinary charges, Mr. and Mrs. Miller, not Colonel Carter." Kane's mother scoffed. "Our son is a star student, a leader. He would never—" The chairwoman raised a hand. "Everything will be addressed, but first, new evidence must be presented." The room stilled. A council member opened a thick blue file and slid it to the center of the table. Inside were printed emails, financial logs, and confidential reports. Mrs. Miller frowned. What is this? The chairwoman spoke slowly, clearly, allowing every word to hit with precision. During the state's preliminary audit, we uncovered irregularities in Westview High's administrative accounts. These ledgers show multiple unreported donations from your family to the school, each coinciding with disciplinary reports involving your son. Kane's face snapped up in disbelief. What? What is she talking about? Marcus's eyes narrowed. He had expected corruption, just not this blatant. Mrs. Miller paled, then forced a laugh. Those were charity gifts. Everyone knows that. No, Sinclair corrected. They were bribes. The word struck the air like a hammer. A council member added, 3 separate incidents involving your son were removed from the disciplinary system within 24 hours of those payments. Detonated. Kane's father's face turned crimson. You have no proof. We have transaction records, Sinclair replied, unfazed. Time-stamped file deletions, administrative signatures, and email confirmations between you and Principal Vaughn discussing ensuring Kane's clean record. Vaughn, now suspended, was not present to defend herself, but her digital fingerprints spoke loudly. Kane swallowed hard. Mom, Dad, you did that? His mother grabbed his hand. We did it for you, honey, to protect your future. But Kane pulled his hand away. Even he couldn't ignore the truth now. The chairwoman exhaled heavily. This level of interference violates state education law, federal student safety mandates, and ethical codes. As of this moment, disciplinary immunity no longer applies. Kane's father's voice shook, not with anger, but with fear. You can't destroy our family over one incident. It wasn't one, Marcus said quietly. It was every incident you paid to bury. Silence swallowed the room. Kane's shoulders collapsed inward. His empire, built on privilege, deceit, and impunity, was crumbling faster than he could comprehend. The chairwoman folded her hands. Effective immediately. Kane Miller is suspended pending expulsion review, and your family is under state investigation for unlawful interference in school disciplinary procedures. Mrs. Miller let out a strangled cry. Mr. Miller slammed his fist on the table. Kane stared at nothing, expression hollow, broken. Justice had arrived, and it demanded a price. But justice wasn't only about punishment, it was also about opening the door to healing. And Danielle's journey toward healing was only just beginning. The cafeteria felt different that afternoon. Usually, Danielle walked into the canteen with her shoulders tight, her eyes low, and her steps measured, as if every table might erupt into mockery without warning. But today, the space hummed with a cautious, respectful quiet. Conversations dimmed as she entered, not with hostility, but something closer to recognition and guilt. Danielle carried her lunch tray in both hands, unsure where to sit. She could still feel the ghost of Kane's fingers around her throat, still hear her cracked whisper begging for help. But beneath that fear was a strange, rising warmth. Her father's unwavering presence, the task force's intervention, the truth finally dragged into daylight. She didn't know what to do with that combination of fear and relief. Danielle? She turned. A girl named Lena, someone she had seen often but never spoken to, stepped forward nervously. Behind her were 2 others, Jamie and Priya, students who had witnessed the bullying but never intervened. Lena bit her lip before speaking. We just wanted to say we're sorry for not doing anything sooner. Jamie nodded, eyes heavy. We saw things, heard things, and we stayed quiet. It wasn't right, Priya added softly. You didn't deserve any of it. Danielle's chest tightened, not with anger, but with something gentler. Her throat ached as she swallowed. It's okay, she whispered. I get it. It's scary. Lena gestured toward an empty table. Sit with us? Danielle hesitated. For months she had eaten alone, protected herself by shrinking, by going silent, by hoping invisibility would keep her safe. But invisibility had never saved her. Slowly she nodded. The 4 girls sat together. The first few minutes were quiet, awkward, tender, like everyone was afraid to break something fragile. But as the silence softened, conversation began to flow, and then Lena asked the question no one had ever asked Danielle before. What really happened? I mean, not just today, but before. Danielle exhaled shakily. She looked down at her hands, then back at the three faces watching her with sincerity. Real sincerity, for the first time. So she spoke. She told them about the shoves in the hallway, the whispered insults, the notebooks knocked to the ground, the paper thrown into her hair, the teachers who looked the other way. She admitted she'd felt invisible until she wasn't, until violence forced people to see her in the worst possible moment. Her voice wavered, but it didn't break. Lena reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Thank you for telling us." Jamie leaned in. "There's a student anti-bullying committee forming. The task force wants students who understand what it's like. They actually asked about you." Danielle blinked. "Me? You're brave," Priya said. "Braver than any of us. You could help change things." Danielle didn't feel brave, but for the first time, she wanted to be. I think I want to join," she said quietly. The three girls smiled, genuine, warm. For the first time since she'd arrived at Westview High, Danielle felt like she wasn't standing alone in the dark. But there was still one final step, something Marcus had prepared for her, something only a father who understood both war and healing could give. Principal Evelyn Vaughan's office felt smaller than before. The blinds were half closed, letting in thin slashes of afternoon sunlight that cut across the room like interrogation lights. Files lay scattered on her desk, some opened, some shoved aside, all of them useless now that the truth had surfaced. When the door opened, Vaughan stiffened. Colonel Marcus Carter stepped inside with the quiet control of a man who didn't need to raise his voice to command a room. His presence felt heavier than the air. Measured, deliberate, unignorable. He closed the door behind him. Vaughan forced herself to stand. "Colonel Carter, this is highly irregular. My attorney should be—" "We don't need attorneys for this conversation," Marcus said calmly. "Not yet." His tone made her knees weaken. She gestured stiffly toward the chair in front of her desk. "Please, sit. I prefer to stand." She swallowed. Marcus looked around the room, not with curiosity, but with evaluation, as if taking in the battlefield before deciding where to strike. Then his eyes settled on her. "This school had one job," he began, "to protect children. You failed that job." Vaughan clasped her hands tightly. "I have dedicated 20 years of my life to this institution. I won awards, I raised graduation rates, You protected predators," Marcus interrupted, voice flat. "You silenced victims. You erased evidence. And you did it for influence, for money, and for your own convenience." Vaughan's facade cracked. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under. Kane's family." "Your responsibility wasn't to Kane's family," Marcus said. "It was to students like my daughter." Her breathing grew uneven. "Please, Colonel, if I lose this job, my career is finished." Marcus stared at her for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and placed a sealed envelope on her desk. What is this?" Vaughan whispered. "A choice." She hesitated before opening the envelope. Inside was a typed agreement. Short, concise, brutal in its simplicity. Voluntary resignation. Immediate. In exchange for no push for criminal indictment from Marcus Carter, no personal lawsuits, no pursuit of individual administrative retaliation. Vaughan's hand trembled. You would let this go?" Marcus's voice lowered, carrying the weight of both mercy and warning. "I will not push for your prosecution if you walk away now, if you take responsibility today. If you stop standing in the way of the reforms this school desperately needs." She felt the ground shift beneath her. "If I refuse?" she asked quietly. "Then," Marcus said, "I will take every piece of evidence, every deleted file, every complaint, every parent testimonial, and hand it directly to the district attorney. And I promise you, Principal Vaughan, they will not offer you a deal." Vaughan's eyes filled, not with sadness, but with the terror of someone seeing her future collapse in real time. He stepped back from the desk. "I don't want your ruin," he said, "but I will accept nothing less than accountability." The room was silent except for the faint hum of the air vent. Vaughn stared at the resignation letter. Her fingers hovered above the pen. She knew there was no escape. "Not anymore. No more excuses," Marcus said softly. "Choose." Vaughn picked up the pen with shaking hands, and as the ink touched the paper, she understood. There was no path left for her to run. 1 week later, Westview High felt like a different school. Morning sunlight filtered through the tall glass windows of the main atrium, illuminating new security panels, fresh signage, and revamped hall monitors wearing updated badges. The building buzzed with the restless energy of change, an unfamiliar but hopeful shift humming through the corridors. Danielle stepped into the lobby slowly, taking it all in. Where once she felt invisible, the very walls now seemed to acknowledge her existence. A new anti-discrimination banner stretched above the entrance, every student protected, every voice heard. Underneath it, students milled about, reading pamphlets, examining new posters, outlining rights, reporting procedures, and helpline numbers. The school had replaced its outdated, symbolic zero-tolerance policy with a comprehensive, enforceable action plan. This was Marcus Carter's impact, etched into every corner of the building. Near the front desk, contractors installed high-resolution cameras, the kind that recorded both video and audio with time-stamped accuracy. A technician explained to an administrator, "Full transparency, no deletion privileges except through district authorization." Exactly what Marcus demanded, but change never arrived without resistance. To the left of the atrium, a cluster of angry parents argued with members of the school board. Their voices rose in sharp, indignant bursts. "It's excessive. Our kids don't need surveillance. This is punishing everyone for a few isolated incidents." A board member responded firmly, "These measures are non-negotiable. Student safety is non-negotiable." Another parent tried, "This is going to make students uncomfortable." "Good," the board member replied. "It means the ones who used to feel too comfortable hurting others will think twice." The argument fizzled. Opposition wilted. Change held its ground. Danielle watched quietly as the group dispersed, defeated. She didn't enjoy seeing people upset, but she couldn't ignore the truth. These reforms were necessary, maybe overdue. And for the first time since enrolling at Westview High, the school wasn't just reacting to harm, it was building safeguards to prevent it. At a nearby table, Lena, Jamie, and Priya waved her over. "Danielle!" Lena beamed. "Did you see the new reporting portal? It's actually easy to use." Jamie held up her phone. "And they added anonymous reports. Anyone can file something without fear." Priya nudged Danielle gently. "They're even forming the anti-bullying committee officially today. Orientation is next week." Danielle felt a flutter in her chest. Not fear, not dread, but something lighter. Hope, maybe even belonging. She glanced around the atrium again. Teachers received new training packets. Counselors discussed mental health resources. Students read updated policies projected onto digital screens. The school was transforming from a place she had feared into one she might eventually trust. All because truth had been forced into the open, and because her father refused to let injustice remain in the dark. Danielle exhaled slowly, feeling the weight on her shoulders lighten just a little. And now, after everything she had endured, the day she had quietly longed for was finally approaching. The history classroom looked the same as the day everything fell apart. Same rows of desks, same faded posters of world maps, same sunlight cutting across the floor in golden stripes. But as Danielle stepped through the doorway, something felt profoundly different. The room fell silent. Not the tense, hostile silence she remembered. Not the silence of judgment. Not the silence that made her shrink into herself. This silence was attentive, alert, almost reverent. For a moment Danielle froze in the doorway, her fingers tightening around the strap of her backpack. A wave of memories surged up. Kane's taunting voice, the scrape of her chair being kicked, the choking pressure on her throat. Her breath stuttered, but then she noticed something new. At the front of the room stood a teacher she had never seen before. Not Harris, the man who ignored her, silenced her, and let cruelty thrive under his watch. This was someone different. A woman in her 30s, warm but professional, with a steady presence that commanded respect without raising her voice. She looked up from her attendance sheet the moment Danielle entered, and she smiled, not the forced, sympathetic smile adults often give to kids who've been hurt. No, hers was genuine. She stepped away from her desk and approached Danielle with calm, unhurried steps. "Good morning, Danielle," she said, her tone gentle but strong. "Welcome back. We're glad to have you." Danielle blinked, taken aback. You know my name?" The teacher nodded. "Of course. I made sure to learn every student's name before taking this class. You're not invisible here. Not anymore." The words struck deeper than the teacher could have known. Students shifted in their seats, watching quietly, not with mockery, but with curiosity and something resembling respect. A few even smiled at her. Some nodded. Others straightened their posture, as if acknowledging her presence carried weight now. Danielle walked toward her seat slowly, hyper-aware of every eye on her. But none of them felt threatening today. None of them felt cruel. She sat down. Her hands trembled at first. But when she opened her notebook, the pages no longer reminded her of fear. They represented survival. Proof she was still here. The new teacher returned to the front of the classroom. "Before we begin today's lesson," she said, "I want to make something very clear." Every student lifted their head. "In this classroom, every voice matters. Every student is safe, and anyone who chooses to challenge that safety, no matter who they are, will answer to me." The message was unmistakable. Even the walls seemed to absorb it. Danielle felt her throat tighten, not from fear, but from gratitude she didn't know how to express. Class began. Pens scribbled. History echoed through the room, and for the first time, Danielle listened without flinching. She wasn't surviving the class anymore. She was part of it. As the bell rang, Danielle gathered her things, feeling lighter than she had in months. As she stepped into the hallway, she noticed a familiar silhouette standing at the far end. Her father. Marcus Carter waited, hands clasped behind his back, expression unreadable, because he had one final message, one powerful truth he wanted the entire school to hear. The afternoon sun cast a warm glow across the school courtyard, where rows of folding chairs stretched across the grass. Students, teachers, staff, and parents filled the seats, buzzing with quiet anticipation. The banners hung behind the makeshift stage read, "Westview High, Rebuilding with Integrity." Every student, every voice, protected. Danielle sat in the front row beside Lena, Jamie, and Priya. Her fingers twisted nervously in her lap, but for once, anxiety wasn't the dominant feeling in her chest. Pride was, because today wasn't just about consequences. It was about change. And change needed a voice, one powerful enough to reshape the culture of an entire school. Principal Vaughn was gone. Kane was suspended pending expulsion. Policies had changed. Systems had shifted. Now the school needed to hear why. A hush swept through the courtyard when Colonel Marcus Carter stepped onto the stage. He stood tall behind the podium, dressed in a simple button-down shirt. Not his uniform, not a symbol of force, just a father who refused to let the world silence his child. He looked out across the crowd, meeting the eyes of teachers who had failed, parents who had ignored the signs, and students who finally understood the weight of silence. He took a breath. "Thank you all for being here," he began, his voice strong and steady, carrying effortlessly through the courtyard. "Today is not about punishment. It's about responsibility." A ripple of quiet spread. "Responsibility," he continued, "to recognize harm, to correct injustice, and to protect the young people who walk through these doors every day trusting us, trusting you, to keep them safe." Danielle felt her throat tighten. Marcus scanned the room, his gaze sharp, but not cruel. My daughter, Danielle, endured more than anyone knew. She was mocked. She was isolated. She was attacked. And far too many people saw it happen and chose silence. Some students lowered their eyes. A few teachers shifted in their seats. "But here is the truth," Marcus said, his voice rising. "Silence is not neutral. Silence is a choice, and when we stay silent in the face of cruelty, we become part of the harm." The air thickened with emotion. He leaned closer to the microphone, his tone soft but piercing. "No student deserves to be silenced." The words struck like lightning, simple, devastating, unforgettable. "No student," he repeated, "deserves to feel invisible. No student deserves fear instead of safety. No student deserves punishment instead of protection." He turned toward the cluster of students sitting together, victims who had once felt helpless, to those who have suffered quietly, who believed their pain didn't matter. "Hear me now. You are seen, you are valued, and your voice will never be ignored again." Danielle's eyes burned. She blinked hard. Marcus placed both hands on the podium. "And to this school. Today marks a new beginning, not because we destroyed anything, but because we rebuilt something better." Applause rose slowly at first, hesitant, then stronger, fuller, rolling across the courtyard with the force of a wave. Marcus stepped back from the microphone. He didn't look triumphant. He didn't look victorious. He looked relieved, like a man who had finally done the one thing he could never compromise: protect his child. Danielle stood as he walked down the steps. They met halfway, and she moved into his arms without hesitation. He held her tightly, gently, like she was the most important thing he'd ever guarded, and for the first time in a long time, Danielle smiled, a real smile, because she had been defended, she had been heard, she had been seen, and now she wasn't afraid to take up space in the world anymore. And that's how a single whispered plea, "Dad, help me," turned a quiet black girl into the spark that exposed an entire system of corruption. Danielle didn't just survive, she forced an entire school to face the truth it had buried for years. And her father? He proved that when justice walks in wearing a uniform, every bully learns their place real fast. Now I want to hear from you. What moment in this story hit you the hardest, and why? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful justice stories just like this one.